The hype continues for UT fans across the state as the Vols get set to play for the SEC Championship.
And with the September 11th attack still fresh on the minds of many, community leaders come together to discuss plans to keep things safe here at home. We'll explain.
I'm Stacey Johnson. Just how private is your private information? We're going to find out. That's coming up on Money Talks.
This is WVLT TV, Knoxville. Right now, WVLT Volunteer TV News at 7 is taking action for you.
Well, the excitement continues on the UT campus as the BCS puts the Vols at number 2 today. Good evening, I'm Alan Williams.
And I'm Liz Tadone. Thanks for joining us. UT students and fans continue to gear up for this weekend's SEC Championship game against LSU. And for some, that means standing in ticket lines for a shot at seeing the Big Orange play in Atlanta. But with a limited number of tickets for the big game, many fans walked away disappointed.
Sold out, looks like.
Is that disappointing?
Yeah, it is. It is. But, you know, if I can't find any, I'll watch it on TV and try to get some for the championship game.
A spokesperson for the UT ticket office says the university will not receive any more tickets for the SEC Championship game. Stores along Cumberland Avenue are already feeling the effects from UT's big win. Store owners on the Strip say that fans are flocking into their stores looking for the latest Big Orange attire, and many businesses are already bracing themselves for Vol Mania to break out if the Vols beat LSU this weekend.
We've had quite a few people. I had people waiting outside the door. The phone's been ringing off the hook. I have had more people asking for game day shirts, and we finally got them in, so with a couple different styles, too.
Some stores say they're already working on championship T-shirts and other UT paraphernalia should the Vols go all the way.
Well, you should expect to see more police officers on Cumberland Avenue during this weekend's SEC title game. The Knoxville Police Department plans to use security measures similar to those in place during the Florida game. Police arrested 6 people and handed out 10 citations during Saturday's post-game party on the Strip. Most of the arrests and citations were for disorderly conduct or public intoxication.
A championship celebration on the high school level is already
up to Washington, and Wolf Blitzer standing by there. Wolf.
Thank you very much, Joey. We want to go right out to Ramstein Air Base, the U.S. Air Base in Germany, where a plane is returning, bringing the bodies of 3 U.S. military personnel killed while on duty in Afghanistan. 2 of those are Green Berets. Green Berets were killed only the other day in so-called friendly fire in southern Afghanistan around Kandahar. 2 of those 2 Green Berets are Sergeant First Class Daniel Henry Petithori, he's 32 years old, from Massachusetts, and Staff Sergeant Brian Cody Prosser, 28, from California. Both of them were killed together with a 3rd Green Beret whose body is not being brought back at this time. The 3rd body is that of Master Sergeant Jefferson Donald Davis, 39, from Tennessee. They're being brought back with full military honors, as you could see here at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. Also aboard this U.S. military transport plane is the body of a 3rd member of the U.S. military, member of the U.S. Navy, electrician's mate, fireman apprentice, Michael J. Jakes Jr., 20 years old, of Brooklyn, New York. He died December 4th after falling from his bunk bed aboard the USS Kitty Hawk, and he sustained at that time a fatal injury to his head. The bodies of 3 U.S. military personnel being brought back right now from Afghanistan. I want to bring in our Bettina Luzier. She's on the scene right now, and she has some more. Bettina?
Yes, Wolf, the honor court is lined up here, and we're seeing now on the right coming here the Joint Service Color Guard. All of this an expression of the U.S. military for their fallen comrades. People here from the Special Forces are here in Ramstein, and we're being told many of them are quite shocked about the loss of their colleagues here. We're waiting now for the casket of Daniel Petithori to be brought down. There's a real sense of loss here in Ramstein. Of course, everybody is watching from afar the developments in Afghanistan. Ramstein, of course, one of the major hubs here of the logistical support going out to Afghanistan.
Bettina, the Ramstein, unfortunately, over the years, has seen these kinds of honor guards, these kinds of military services on many occasions. Is it normal that in this have the forces over at Ramstein been told that those U.S. military personnel who are killed in Afghanistan will be brought first back to Ramstein? Is that going to be the standard operating procedure?
Yes, it is. Often the standard procedure is also that they have to go an autopsy. That is what will happen tomorrow on Friday morning. Well, they will be brought here to the Landstuhl Hospital, where there's a mortuary. That is apparently standard procedure. And we are expecting also that the third victim of this friendly fire incident will be brought to Ramstein later on. Already earlier on Thursday, one of the wounded of that incident has been brought here to the Landstuhl Hospital. That is the largest U.S. military hospital in Europe. He is in guarded conditions, and the doctors are telling us it will take another, 48 to 72 hours or so before they will know more about his long-term prognosis. On Friday morning, we are also expecting the arrival of the remaining 16 wounded of that incident. So people here in Ramstein are closely involved with the situation, obviously, in Afghanistan, and are expecting more of the casualties to arrive here over the next 24 hours. Wolf?
And Bettina, all three of the Green Berets who were killed in that incident near Kandahar were members of the 3rd Battalion, 5th Special Forces Group. The Green Berets based at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. The third body will be brought back shortly. Jefferson Donald Davis, he's a Master Sergeant. He was Master Sergeant from Tennessee, and he will be arriving at Ramstein separately from his two comrades, the other two Green Berets, Daniel Henry Petithory, he's a Sergeant First Class, and Brian Cody Prosser, 28 years old. He's a Staff Sergeant, both members of the U.S. Green Beret. That incident involved a U.S. precision-guided missile. I think we're beginning to see the first casket now being removed from this huge transport plane that flew over from the scene near Afghanistan with the bodies of these 3 U.S. military men. This moment will be repeated twice. That was the body, the casket carrying the body of Daniel Henry Petithory, 32 years old, of Massachusetts, Sergeant First Class. I want to bring in our Pentagon correspondent, our military affairs correspondent, Jamie McIntyre. Jamie, give our viewers who may not be aware some of the details how this so-called friendly fire incident occurred.
Well, these troops, who are Green Berets, some of the most experienced and trained forces, were operating right with some of the opposition forces that are putting the squeeze on Kandahar, and it looks like will bring about the fall of Kandahar. There were 2 teams of these special forces operating in the area, and they were in a combat zone in which they were exchanging fire with Taliban forces that are still in the city. At some point, they called in for what's called close air support. Some member of the team radioed the coordinates determined by portable GPS system of where they wanted the close air support to come. A B-52 bomber using one of the U.S. most accurate satellite-guided 2,000-pound bombs dropped that bomb to hit at those coordinates, but somehow it hit within about 100 meters of where these two groups of special forces and Afghan opposition fighters were all gathered. The blast, the powerful blast, the shrapnel caused burn wounds, caused some shrapnel wounds and also some burst eardrums, and killed 3 Americans and 5 Afghans, injured more than 24 others. And again, the Pentagon is investigating how this happened. It could have been that the bomb malfunctioned. It could have been that the coordinates were determined incorrectly on the ground, or they could have been entered incorrectly in the cockpit of the B-52. That's something that the Pentagon will have to determine. Or it could be something as simple as Defense Secretary Rumsfeld said yesterday, a bent fin on the plane could have caused the missile to go slightly astray. Although this is one of the most accurate bombs that the U.S. has, it's not 100% accurate. The pictures here of the 3 soldiers show that these are not, these are not young raw recruits who are just out of boot camp. These were very experienced, some of the most highly trained specialized troops that were involved in this dangerous mission on the front line. And when it comes to dangerous missions, there are few missions that are as dangerous as calling in a fire on your, essentially your own position, right near where you are on the ground. The slightest thing goes wrong and it can be deadly. In this case, something did go wrong and it was deadly. Wolf?
And Jamie, we're now seeing the second casket that shortly will be removed from this military transport plane. The casket, we believe, of Staff Sergeant Brian Cody Prosser, and you point out they were not necessarily teenagers. Prosser was 28 years old. Daniel Henry Petithori was 32 years old. The third Green Beret, whose body is not being brought back at this particular time, Jefferson Donald Davis, Master Sergeant, 39 years old, from Tennessee. The young sailor who was killed tragically falling out of his bunk bed aboard the USS Kitty Hawk, Michael J. Jakes, only 20 years old, of Brooklyn, New York, and his casket will be coming off that military transport plane shortly. The investigation could take some time, couldn't it, Jamie, before the definitive explanation for this friendly fire incident is determined?
It may take a matter of days or even perhaps a matter of weeks, and it may never be known, depending on what the records show. If it turns out that the coordinates were entered incorrectly, they may be able to determine that from the equipment that's on the B-52. But if it turns out that it was some malfunction in the weapon itself, which of course was destroyed in the accident, they may never be able to determine that. What they do know is that the accuracy rate or the operating rate of these bombs is about 85% to 90% of the time they hit precisely where they're supposed to hit. Well, that still leaves a 10 to 15% margin of error when they either don't hit exactly where they're supposed to, or they can sometimes go wildly astray. It's simply not a perfect science at this point, although the United States at this point in the military has the most accurate weapons systems in the world, and this bombing campaign in Afghanistan has been the most accurate ever, even exceeding that of Kosovo, when the U.S. had to operate with its NATO allies without the benefit of forward air controllers on the ground. And that's what these troops on the ground were providing, those eyes on the ground that increase the accuracy, minimize the civilian casualties, and produced probably one of the most effective air campaigns the world has ever seen.
Let's watch the casket of Staff Sergeant Brian Cody Prosser be brought to the waiting hearse. The casket of Brian Cody Prosser, 28 years old, from California. Now will be driven away as his comrade, Daniel Henry Petithory, 32, from Massachusetts. Both Green Berets, men who fought outside of Kandahar and were killed in the so-called friendly fire incident. Jamie McIntyre, you mentioned earlier that what these Green Berets and their colleagues, their comrades in arms, were doing could have set the stage for what's unfolding right now in Kandahar, the apparent collapse of the Taliban and their last remaining stronghold. Do we have any more precise information of what their mission, these Green Berets, were doing?
Well, they were working directly with the opposition forces, in this case those that were commanded by Hamid Karzai, who has been picked as the leader of the new interim government in Afghanistan. In fact, Karzai was injured, although not seriously, in the same blast. So they were operating right in the same area as he was pushing in from the north of Kandahar, putting the pressure on Mullah Omar and the Taliban holdouts that have been holding up there in Kandahar. So the bombing that was taking place there, and again, the Pentagon showed more pictures of it today, where they were able to hit buildings where Taliban troops had gathered, trenches where they had dug in. The reason they're able to do that kind of pinpoint bombing is that these brave soldiers were risking their lives on the front lines, providing the eyes, calling in the coordinates, sometimes using laser target designators to point out the targets to pilots. It is, as I said, one of the most dangerous missions when you have to call in friendly fire to hit enemy positions close to your position, because there's just very little margin for error.
All right, Jamie McIntyre, I want to thank you. I also want to thank Bettina Luzer, who's been on the scene at Ramstein at the air base. The body of Michael J. Jakes. He was a electrician's mate fireman apprentice who fell off of a bunk bed aboard the USS Kitty Hawk while on duty on December 4th, and he sustained a massive head injury, fatal head injury as it turned out to be. His casket will be removed from this military transport plane momentarily as well, and will be taken away as the other two caskets were. And Jefferson Donald Davis, the third Green Beret who was killed in that so-called friendly fire incident, 39 years old, from Tennessee, he will be brought back shortly. I want to go back to Joey Chen now in Atlanta for more on this. Joey?
Back to the CNN newsroom. We want to take you quickly to Goshen, Indiana. Right now, the Indiana State Police and continuing following developments. We'll now return to Wolf in Washington.
Thank you very much, Joey. And we're following the other story that we've been watching over these past several minutes, the return of caskets, bodies of U.S. military personnel who died while on duty serving the U.S. in and around Afghanistan. This is the casket, the body of a sailor. The sailor, electrician's mate, fireman apprentice, Michael J. Jakes, Jr., only 20 years old, of Brooklyn, New York. He fell from his bunk bed aboard the USS Kitty Hawk and sustained a fatal injury to his head while on duty. I've been aboard the USS Kitty Hawk, and I know that sometimes in rough waters, in those bunk beds, when you're high up, 2, 3, even 4 up, it could be pretty high, and if you fall down, obviously, if you hit your head in an unfortunate situation, in a tragic situation, it can get you killed. And unfortunately, tragically, in the case of Michael J. Jakes, that is indeed what has happened in this particular case. He is being received, obviously, with full military honors, as were the 2 Green Berets whose bodies were brought back. Let's listen in a little bit. And that will apparently conclude the full military color guard service in honor of these U.S. military personnel. Bettina Luzier, if you're still there, is there anything else expected at Ramstein at the airbase? All right, Bettina's not there, unfortunately. And we will move from the Ramstein Air Base in Germany, the scene of so many of these transfers of bodies over the many years. This was a scene during the Gulf War as well, when U.S. military personnel who were killed in action, their bodies were brought back to Ramstein first during that war, as is the case this time. We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll go over to Afghanistan. We'll get the very latest on what's happening on the ground, including the apparent fall of Kandahar. Stay with us.